Welcome, everybody, and good evening. It's nice to have a diverse group of Bait folks, friends and fans of Chanan, and concerned and interested community members. And I really want to express my gratitude to Chanan. Figuring out what Israel programming looks like at the Bait is not always a simple proposition. And I was really moved by Chanan's offer to share some firsthand perspectives about what's going on in Israel right now. We can hear from experts and pundits, but one of the things that's most meaningful is a firsthand perspective from a community member who's just been there, who has, through family and just Chanan's typical characteristic, curiosity, deep caring and intellect and broad perspective, a beautiful perspective to share with us. Obviously, we're all concerned about the state of affairs in Medinat Yisrael, different ways to think about it from each of our own vantage points and perspectives. For me, just the question of is civil society and are the relationships between people who disagree going to endure, feels like a front of mind question, along with the political perspectives we might each have about the issues under discussion, and to get an opportunity to see a little bit inside how people are responding is a privilege, and to do it with our dear, cherished friend, Chanan Kessler, is a treat. So thank you, Chanan. And as I know Chanan will mention, please feel free to pop questions into the chat over the course of his presentation. And I'll make sure that he hears them from me at the conclusion. For the duration of the presentation itself, we'll have everybody muted so we don't have any background noise and we can really hear and take it in. So thank you, Chanan.
Thank you, Rob Stephen. I really, really appreciate you giving me this opportunity and allowing me to give the presentation through the Hebrew Institute. And the presentation will be about 30-40 minutes or something, and then feel free to put questions in the chat. And let me just start by just explaining why I wanted to do this. I was in Israel for 2 weeks during two of the most consequential weeks in Israel's history. I was there from July 17th to July 31st, and during the time of some of the biggest anti-government demonstrations, as well as the passage of a law which restricts the power of the Supreme Court in Israel. I also have a lot of family in Israel, and many of them are deeply involved with the activities, which you'll hear about. I will be giving some of the details of their personalities and how events there are affecting them. And then finally, I wanted to share, I took a lot of pictures and videos, and I wanted to share them because I think they'll help give a sense of the turmoil that's going through the Israel society. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Okay. Whoops. Okay. Start at the beginning. Okay. So my presentation is called Passion, Crisis, and Hope, a report of my visit to Israel. And just as a disclaimer, before I get started, I wanted to kind of say what I'm not trying to do here, which is get political and try to convince you of which side is right, although I'll be transparent that I'm very sympathetic with the protesters, but that's not my objective here. I'm really trying to give you guys an insight into what's going on the ground in Israeli society. I'm not making any predictions of what's going to happen. I'm not a Navi, I'm not a prophet. And I also just want to note that there are many others who have gone to Israel, come away with a different point of view or perspective on what's happening. So this is really a sense, my experience, but hopefully will give you a sense of, through my own experience, some of the broader issues that are going on there. And I'll take some questions at the end, but don't ask me like, what should happen and stuff like that. I'm really going to just try to be, as I said, descriptive, describing what's happening rather than saying what should be happening. So this is the outline of the presentation. I'm going to talk about my family. I'm going to summarize the conflict, summarize each side's position. I'm going to give a presentation on give you some videos and pictures of some of the demonstrations, and end with some hopeful ideas, since we should always end with hope. So my family. So the first family member I want to introduce is my cousin who lives in Modi'in. She was born in Israel. She's a Sabra. She served in the Navy for 20 years. And then after that, she worked as a special ed teacher for over 20 years. And then she retired. And then a few months ago, she texted me, Chanan, I'm working again. I now have a full-time job, which is being part of the demonstrations. She's in charge of a bus that goes from Modi'in to Tel Aviv every Saturday night. So she organizes who's going to be on the bus and when the bus leaves. And so she's a facilitator. And I took a picture of her car. This is what her front seat looks like. And as you can tell, the passenger seat is outfitted with basically her equipment, if I could say that. You can see the Israeli flag, a hat, a shirt, and a horn. And she's got a bumper sticker on her front, which says, Yemanim usmolim mesarvim liot an oivim, that the right and the left refuse to be enemies. So this is like, her car is like decked out with the equipment she needs to be ready for a demonstration at any time. She has a sister who lives in Efrat, who is completely on the other side. And basically they agree that we cannot talk politics when we get together. The next family member I'd like to introduce is my cousin in Jerusalem. And she made Aliyah with her family in 1970. She's a grandmother of 7 children from a religious family, let's say Dati Leumi. And she has gone to every single demonstration in Jerusalem on Saturday night since they started in late January. And the one time that she had an argument with her husband while I was there was over, he wanted to like daven somewhere after Saturday night, which would have delayed them from going to the demonstration. And they got into a big argument. And basically, we were going to go to the demonstration as soon as Shabbat went out. And this is a photograph of the beginning of a demonstration in Jerusalem. Her brother, his name is Elchanan Glat. I can say that because he is a public figure in Israel. He's in charge of the Bnei Akiva organization in Israel, and he lives in Ofra, and he's very active in the pro-government side. And this is a picture that he posted to his Facebook page after the one of the pro-judicial reform demonstrations. And you see him sitting on the, looking very happy and sitting on the bima, on the platform in front of the demonstration, where some of the speakers for the demonstration were sitting. The last family member I would like to introduce is my relative in Even Yehuda, which is a small town near Netanya. And he was born in Israel, served in the Yom Kippur War. He's in his 70s, as you can tell, with his wife. He coordinates the activities of his town and as well as 6 surrounding towns around Even Yehuda. He organizes and facilitates the demonstrations from his town. He meets with he's in charge of getting the permits for the police. He meets with the police before the demonstrations to get the permits, to tell them where they're going to be demonstrating, and so that they're on the same page. And this is one of the demonstrations that he organized. And one of the things they do is they take over bridges. And there's a sign that says Lochmim Demokratia, fighters for democracy. And he told me an incredible story, just to give you a sense of the devotion that he has to the cause. There was an incident where 2 demonstrators were arrested and brought to an Arab town about 15 miles away. He organized a convoy of about 20 cars, and he told me the story. They texted everybody, they make sure they got some lawyers. They drove as a convoy to the Arab town with the idea that they were not going to leave the town until the demonstrators who were arrested were released. And when they got to the town, the Arab residents greeted them, they gave them food, they gave them water, and they stayed till late in the night until the demonstrators who were arrested were released. So the level of commitment is just unbelievable. And basically, I just wanted to give a summary of what is the conflict about. And I'm going to just use the language instead of left and right, which I don't think is too descriptive, or pro-reform or anti-reform. I'll just say pro-government and anti-government. On the pro-government side, and I gave if you can see, there's some bullet points of the positions. Their main position is that in the last election, they won 64 out of the 120 Knesset seats, which is a clear majority, not an overwhelming majority, but a clear majority. And that elections have consequences. Democracy means majority rule. They're in the majority. So they have the power to implement reforms and changes. That's what democracy is. They also believe that the Supreme Court in Israel, who are appointed, they're not elected, have been taking the law into their own hands to strike down government actions, and that their power should be reduced. They also believe that the protesters are sore losers and elitists who are not used to being in power, and that the protesters are endangering the security of the state with talk about refusal to serve. These are a couple of the signs that I saw that kind of give you a sense of the pro-government position. This is one sign that there was a demonstration on Saturday night, I believe it was, in Tel Aviv, a pro-government demonstration. And this was a demonstrator who was very tired from the demonstration, waiting on a bus bench. And she had this sign, so I took a photograph of it. And it says, "We are not going to buckle under or bow to violence. Ha'am bachar reforma mishpatit," that the nation has chosen to have judicial reform, and shows a clenched fist, sort of striking at one of the symbols of the state of Israel. This is another scene. I didn't actually take this photo, but I did find this one, which the sign says, "Hem gonvim lanu et habechirot," that they're stealing the election, basically. That the election, we won the election, The elections have consequences, and they're trying to stop us from implementing the policies that we ran on. However, some of the points that the other side makes is that 64 out of 120 is not such a huge majority to implement such sweeping changes. And if you add up all the votes that both sides got, it was about 50-50. And it just the way the votes are counted in Israel, they ended up with 64 out of the seats. And that the coalition that ran was not really running on judicial reform. That was not an issue that was part of the election. So that's the basic position of the pro-government side. Here are some bullet points which lay out the anti-government arguments. Again, I'm not endorsing, or I'm just trying to explain here. The Supreme Court in Israel plays a crucial role in checks and balances, especially because the Knesset is just one house. In other parliamentary democracies, there might be two houses, and that already power is in Israel, because also it doesn't have a constitution, that it's vulnerable to having power concentrated too fully in the Knesset, and that the court has played a crucial role in checks and balances. That giving the Knesset more power to determine who gets appointed to the Supreme Court, which was one of the positions that the pro-government side has, could make the Supreme Court into a rubber stamp like in Poland and in Hungary. The protests are really also not just about the judicial reform, but about the nature of the state as a secular democracy. Some of the policies that are proposed would be transferring money out of Arab schools to Haredi schools, and making Torah study the actual equivalent of army service, not just an exemption from the army, but actually the same as serving in the army for rights that citizens have. A third of the coalition members did not serve in the army because they they got exemptions. And also the personalities of some of the people in the government. Seems to be the lightning rod are two people. One in particular is Itamar Ben-Gvir, who serves as the Minister of National Security. He was a follower of Kahana, who was actually not allowed to serve in the army because of his activities of inciting riots and so forth. So, and he's now has an important position in the Israeli government. Just a kind of, however, point on this side is that the left was very disorganized in the last elections, and also the left has never really been able to convince the 20% of the Arab citizens of Israel to join in the project of creating a pluralistic secular state. And I'll just give you a little story that one of the demonstrations I was at, a Arab woman walked by, and some of the people kind of shouted or said to her, "We're doing this for you. We're doing this for you." And she just walked by like it had absolutely no relevance to her. Like, this is just a, I don't know, Jewish matter. And that's kind of like an unfortunate truth that that the Arab citizens have not really been brought into the coalition. So that's just an overall sense of what the two sides are. And now I'm going to get into the demonstrations themselves. As I said before, there's basically a conflict between competing visions of the nature of the state. And one way to think about it is kind of the idea of a third temple. That one side believes that, so the government side believes that it's aspirational, that the third temple, whatever that might mean, it still remains in the future. Whereas the other side understands that the state itself is the third temple. And it's to defend the idea of a liberal democratic state that is the crux of their beliefs. The level of mobilization by the anti-government activists is just unbelievable. There are, every single week, I would estimate, well, there are demonstrations all over the country. I would say probably 250, 300,000 people every week demonstrating, which is about, say, 3% of the population, which would translate in the United States terms of like 10 million people every single week. So the United States has never seen anything like the level of activism that is happening in Israel right now. It's just unbelievable, and I will give you some examples of it. The demonstration, the organization is really completely grassroots. It's not really led by politicians. As a matter of fact, the organizers specifically don't want the politicians involved. They want it to be lay-led. And this is some of the, this is a picture that I took of T-shirts. T-shirts are a very important part of the just giving a sense of the amount of activity going on. So this is my cousin in Modi'in, her part of her T-shirt collection, which she decides which T-shirts she's going to wear based on the demonstration that she's going to. One of them says Ma'avak Hanashim, which is the women's, Achim Leneshek, Brothers in Arms, Koach Kaplan, which refers to the demonstrations in Tel Aviv, Habayat Mishutaf, which is the theme of the Jerusalem demonstrations. So it's really, and I saw many, many other T-shirts. This was about the most moving one that I saw, which were T-shirts that fighters who fought in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, where they have a special T-shirt that says, Lochmei Kippur 73, Navakim al Dmuta Shel HaMedina, that the fighters of the Yom Kippur War are struggling for the character of the nation. The first day I was in Israel was called a Yom Shibush, a national day of disruption. Many companies gave their employees the day off from work. This was the schedule of the demonstrations. And you can see that they started at 6:30 in the morning, and they went till 8:30 at night. At least, well, that's the last one started. And that one was in Tel Aviv, but you can see that there are different places around the country. And it's just like, and this was a message that, this is actually a picture of my cousin's cell phone announcing the schedule for the demonstrations. The first morning I was in Israel. The first demonstration I went to, which was in the mall in Modi'in.
רשויות, שלוש רשויות לארץ שלי. לולא היו לה שלוש רשויות, לא הייתה זה הארץ שלי. הארץ שלי, שלוש רשויות,
So they took very clever, they took a Purim song about Haman's hat having three sides, and they transformed it into that how important it is for our nation to have three branches of government. Next slide. That evening, on the day of disruption, I attended a demonstration in Tel Aviv. This is not a picture that I took, but this gives you a sense of the massive nature of these demonstrations in Tel Aviv. What you're seeing here is the main artery, Ayalon, which is the main road that connects Tel Aviv to the rest of the country, completely shut down by demonstrators. The next Saturday night, I attended my first demonstration in Jerusalem. And this is people on the way to the demonstration. This is when I learned a very important lesson, which was to get a pair of earplugs, because these demonstrations are very loud, and you'll see that people are wearing earplugs. The drums are a important part of it, and you kind of get a sense of a little bit of a festive atmosphere, I could say. That like people kind of like having, I wouldn't say a good time, but they're like very, very enthusiastic, and there's a little bit of a party atmosphere. After the demonstration, as I am returning to, let's see, hold on. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. After the demonstration, returning back, and this was the scene that I photographed. It's a tent city in Jerusalem, and I want to tell you the story of these tents. This was in anticipation of the vote in the Knesset, which was scheduled the following week. And so they started this basically march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, kind of like invoking the ancient rite of going up to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festivals. And the walk took about 5 days, and they slept in tents along the way. they were, wherever they were, people came out to bring them food and water. And there's a story of one of the leaders of the demonstration. Her name is Shikma Bressler. And somebody noticed that her shoes were worn and were wearing out. So they asked her, "What size shoe do you wear?" And within a short time, somebody had bought her a new pair of shoes to wear. The next morning, so this is Sunday morning now, there was a human chain that was organized from, originally it was going to be the Kotel, but it ended up being Jaffa Gate to the Knesset. The idea being that they were going to link up Judaism with democracy, that they're inseparable. There was a Google form to fill out to participate in the human chain. And then everybody who filled out the form got a text indicating where they were going to stand. So they would give sort of like a number, and you're going to stand between this street and that street. There was also a prayer service at the Kotel beforehand. And so my cousin and I, since we went to the prayer service, we were given a spot close to the Kotel, near Jaffa Gate. This was at the end of the prayer service. Reciting the prayer for the state of Israel. Then, after that, just the passion that you could feel, the prayer for the state, the welfare of the state. When we think about that prayer, it just had a different resonance, because it wasn't just about the state as like maybe looking at from the outside, but as you saw, the megaphone was directed right to the Kotel. And it just was so moving to hear that prayer. Before we moved to the human chain, there was this scene. Trouble transitioning. Next slide. Hold on a second. Okay. The next day was Monday, the date scheduled for the vote on judicial reform. And you can see the people the demonstrators completely surrounding the Knesset, hoping that the vote would fail or that it would be postponed. But it wasn't, and they did vote to pass the law to restrict the court's ability to overrule government actions. Before the vote, the opposition walked out. The leaders of the movement to restrict the court's power took this selfie, which has become kind of a iconic, famous / infamous image. And this is Itamar Ben-Gvir standing next to Yair Lapid. One thing you kind of notice if you look at his picture, first of all, you see that Knesset is not full, it's kind of empty, and they're happy, but you kind of can sense that who are the people who are leading this judicial reform? A lot of people with kippot. The next day, this was the newspapers. It's about 7 newspapers. Somebody, one of the organizations leading the demonstrations, took out this ad, and it says, "A dark day for Israeli democracy." This was the front page of Haaretz, and many other newspapers carried this. The next night was Tisha B'Av, and I went to hear the reading of Scroll of Lamentations, Megillat Eicha, on the Tayelet, overlooking the old city. And it definitely was an eerie feeling, and it was my sense, and I didn't really talk to others, but I think many other people had the sense that it was very hard to separate the weight of current events with the memory of ancient destruction. My last Saturday night in Jerusalem, went to the demonstration, the weekly demonstration, which was a little different because the reform had passed. So it was interesting to see what the tone of this demonstration would be. The previous night, I had had dinner with an old friend of mine who made Aliyah about 25 years ago, and he said he cried when he heard that the judicial reform had passed, and for the first time, he really didn't feel so hopeful about the future of the state. These were some of the scenes of that demonstration in Jerusalem. I did kind of have a thought that Thomas Jefferson would have been very proud of the people of Israel. I don't know if there's ever been so many demonstrators for the idea of democracy. I kind of gave you the outline of some of the things that she said in that little speech. 3 branches, and not one less, equal rights before the law. And Yariv Levin, who is the deputy prime minister, his name rhymes with how the Pauline is pronounced in Hebrew. So she was saying, Yariv Lavin, Kanzalo Pauline, which is not, it's not Poland here. Once again, just hold on. Here was the next speech.
ניצבנו דוממים ומפולגים מול פירוק האתוס היהודי דמוקרטי של המדינה שקמה ברוח מגילת העצמאות. לרגע נדמה היה שאלו הן פניה של החברה הישראלית ואין לנו תקומה. אבל זה היה רק לרגע. כי בחצי שנה האחרונה אנחנו התעוררנו! התעוררנו לשמור יחד על הדמוקרטיה!
She was saying that this is not the time to give up, to feel bad. The last half a year, hitararnu, we have awoken. I'll just give you, before I turn to hopeful ideas, go into the darkness for a second. Here's a sign that I photographed. Get off the balcony or get off the ledge. The nation is crumbling. The last Saturday, Shabbat afternoon, I spent with another cousin in Jerusalem, and his wife is a judge in Israel. And two of her sons, my cousin is also a lawyer. Two of his sons are lawyers. And he has Canadian citizenship. So the sons have Canadian citizenship. And she said to me, she would not be surprised if they left. My cousin in Modi'in drove me to the airport. She said, I used to make sure that I only bought Israeli products. Now I make sure that I never buy Israeli products because I don't want my money going to this government. Her last words to me was, I'm going to open a foreign bank account. I may need your help. I said, I will do what I can. My cousin in Evan Yehuda sent me this email when I returned. Sorry we did not meet again, but it was a crazy week. And that Sunday was the top of everything. We went to Jerusalem with 7 buses under my responsibility. I'm a bit more optimistic now, but that's only in the short run. Zionism will not survive if we do not take this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rebuild it on a different basis with an updated social political contract between the country and its citizens. And I would like to just show this image. I almost hesitated to show this image, but my cousin sent it to me. It's a picture of graves, not actual graves, but what graves look like with stones on them. And it says, and has the names of people, soldiers killed in wars. And on each one is written, Lashav, for nothing. I think it's a little dark, but it really gives you the sense of the anguish that many people feel. But I don't want to end in the darkness. I want to end in the hope. Hatikva, the national anthem, is called the Hope. And I want to give you 3 reasons for hope. One is there's a shared destiny and a shared enemy. The second is that both sides have a common purpose and are displaying incredible amounts of patriotism and love of country. The love of country is just overpouring. And finally, the resilience of the nation. On one of the days, I visited the Heichal HaZikaron. It's a memorial to the 25,000 soldiers who've been killed in all the Israeli wars and military actions. And this is a picture for each soldier. There's a little stone and their names written on it and the date of their death. And it's just so striking. This is 2022. And I photographed where it stops and the stones that have nothing written on it. Those people, they're not from the left or from the right. They're just people who love their country and defending their country. I saw many outpourings and signs of unity. These are a couple of signs. Ahavat chinam nenatzeach. Love will triumph. The other sign says, Achdut Yisrael mutelat alai. The unity of the country is incumbent upon me. Every demonstration ended with Hatikva. The last night I was there, I took the subway, the new train system, which is incredible, from Jerusalem back to Modi'in for my last night. As I descended the escalator, this was the scene. Notice there's a piano. There's a piano at every train station. And I'll leave you with this. The resilience of the people. I hope that that gave you a sense of what's going on in Israel. That was my 2-week intensive experience of it. I tried to give you a sense of how I experienced it and just the incredible ferment that's happening there.
Thank you, Chanan. Just such a wide-ranging and deep dive into what's happening and things we can't really fully access from here, and just felt the emotion, the gravity of the situation, and all the feelings and the hope and the resilience at the same time. So I want to really, really thank you for documenting and sharing so beautifully. As of right now, there have not been any questions posted in the chat, but please feel free to still do so. And folks can also now unmute themselves. So if you want to unmute yourself and speak in your own voice to share a comment or a question, please do.
For sharing, Chanan.
Anybody want to share a question, comment, or a thought? Great, thank you in the chat from Elliot. Thank you.
Again, I don't have any, can't make predictions about what's going to happen. I just know that the country is going through a tumultuous time. Passions are so high. I've never witnessed a level of commitment and love of country in my life before. And I guess I was privileged in that way to just those 2 weeks where I couldn't have picked a more impactful or purposeful 2 weeks to be in Israel. A week before the vote, and then like a week after the vote. And this is continuing every day, every week. You might not read about it in the papers here, you know, just from time to time, but it is transforming people's lives, bringing people together, and hopefully not pulling them apart as much as bringing people together. And that was a question that I left with. You know, is this the people coming together, or is this the country breaking apart? And I really don't have an answer to that question.
Benjamin, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Chanan. Sorry, I got here a little late. I was just curious. You were in Israel for the duration of this. What would you say was the role of? You got to see a lot of this, like on hand. I was just curious. What was your perception of where the Orthodox community in general stood on what was going?
That's a great question, Benjamin. Okay, so kind of like depends. Like there's a Tel Avivian perspective and a Jerusalem perspective. Definitely, the vast, overwhelming majority of the Orthodox community is on the pro-government side. In Jerusalem, you do see, you know, and you saw people with kippot, and you saw the prayer for the government. You do see activists who are on the modern Orthodox community. I don't know about other towns, but it's in Tel Aviv. It was a really secular scene. As a matter of fact, I asked my cousin, like, is there a minyan? Because is there a minyan for Ma'ariv here? You know, you have like 100,000 people. Can you get 10 for a minyan here? And she said, I think there might be. I don't know. You know, so I don't know. If I were there, I would be trying to organize a minyan. But overwhelmingly, the Orthodox, as well as many of the kind of like Sephardim, I guess, although that Ashkenazi Sephardi distinction is breaking down, but still the Orthodox are on the pro-government side and the secular are on the anti-government side. Although in Jerusalem, it's a little different, but even in Jerusalem, the overwhelming majority of people on appearances were not religious.
So if this, heaven forbid, heats up, it's going to be the Orthodox versus the.
Well, that's part of the.
Is that it?
Well, one of the big issues is that, and I think this is really one of the crux issues, is that the secular side sees a Orthodox takeover of the government, frankly. And you can see that in some of the actions in terms of funneling more money into Haredi schools. And as I mentioned, making Torah study the equivalent of serving in the army. The idea of that, trying to encourage Haredi people to enlist in the army seems to be by the wayside. So that's definitely one of the issues, is that the anti-government side feels that they're losing the country. That's not the country that they recognize. And I think that's what my relative was trying to say in his email to me, that they need basically a new social contract between the state and its citizens to firmly base the state on democratic and secular foundation. And they see it going in completely the opposite direction.
Could I ask one more question before you go to Mr. Raven, or is there no time?
Go ahead.
All right. Oh God, now I think I forgot it. But come back to me. It's all right.
Elliot, go ahead.
My question is, have you heard from your relatives since you left? And had they said anything to indicate they see things a little differently in the months or few weeks since that have passed?
I don't think anything's changed. Matter of fact, I am just utterly amazed and struck by the energy that these people have. I mean, they're still balancing the rest of their lives with their work in the movement. And you would think that after a while, like, if you look at protests in the United States, they kind of fade over time, right? There's a big initial outpouring, and then it kind of fades. This has been going on for a half a year, and it shows no sign of abating. And it's the level of commitment is just unbelievable. They're also getting funding from a lot of the high-tech industry is helping to fund all those T-shirts and flags and everything like that. I did want to mention at one point, like, somewhere there's a town in China getting a lot of orders for T-shirts for Israel and flags. There's a big import in flags and T-shirts coming in, and it's not abating at all. It was interesting to see whether it would after the vote, but there are other issues on the table, and as long as those issues remain live, the protests are going to continue.
Moshe, this will be the last question, and then
Okay, just curious, doesn't the army usually vote more conservative? Like, they were the ones who brought in Netanyahu the first time when he ran against Shimon Peres. So where does the army stand, with this?
I don't know about the army, but I can tell you about the police are kind of like in a no-win situation, because they're both charged with keeping order. But many of them are, and the protests are lawful. They get license from the government to do that. So it's really civil disobedience. Some of the demonstrators do get out of hand, and the police have to intervene. There's been calls that saying, it's that the police are using too much force because they've been using water cannon, and my cousin's son got pepper sprayed one night. So a lot of people in the Army are, like some of the senior people are really concerned that this is going to hurt national security. And we're hoping that the government backs down from some of the more radical reforms that it wants to implement. And I'm sure Israel's enemies are watching to see what's going on, and must be shaking their heads, thinking that here we spent millions of dollars and years trying to defeat Israel, and it's maybe all we have to do is watch it break up from the inside. I think the army reflects the people. It's a people's army. So they're in a difficult bind because they both, they have to keep order, but they also reflect the people. And a lot of the people who are supporting the government don't serve in the army, which is one of the big bones of contention.
Thank you. We're going to go to Benjamin for a last one. I want to know Rabbi Bab Kaplan's comment as well, that tourism to Israel has not been affected with some of the highest numbers on record. Interesting to note that too. Okay, so Benjamin, last word, and then Chanan, if you want to say anything to close it out.
Thanks. So the social contract you mentioned, do you think there can be a new social contract with the current people in power who are trying to lodge themselves in power, with like that sort of how shall we say, influence coming from the top down? Can Israel negotiate within itself if it has such influence coming from the top? Can it create a new social contract as long as Netanyahu
Great
is
question. I'm not a political scientist, so I can't give you an answer. I don't know. I think time will tell, and we just have to hope that the forces of moderation prevail and that the people can find a common purpose. And there's definitely a lot of passions on both sides, and hopefully the crisis atmosphere will abate and that people can start working together. Whether it will result in a new social contract, I kind of a little doubtful about that, but look, something's going to happen because this is unprecedented. It may have actually been unprecedented in any democratic society. So there will be some result of this because it's not going to just go away quietly.
Well, I guess there's hope in that.
Hanan, any last words you want to share before we wrap up?
I just thank everybody for listening and for your questions, and I just hope that you learned something and think about what you can do. I don't know what the answer to that question is, but I hopefully it will at least draw us nearer to our beloved homeland.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Chanan. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and really for taking the time to listen, learn, take it to heart, and wishing everybody a great night.
All right. Good night.
Thank you all.